seen all the Best Picture nominees, so let's talk about Elvis. What is it? Elvis is a biographical musical drama about arguably the most famous American entertainer who ever lived, the titular Elvis Presley. It's a cradle-to-grave biopic, more or less, but it's also definitely less interested in who Elvis was as a man and more interested in his relationship to his longtime business manager, Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks, who some might argue exercised a little too much control over Elvis's career and life. And the movie certainly argues this. Who was it made by? Goddamn Baz Luhrmann. If I knew how to use After Effects, I would have included like some exploding lights and fireworks there, but if I had to use one word to describe Baz Luhrmann's work and reputation, it would be ostentatious. If I had to use another word, it would be flashy. If I had to use a third word, it would be big. Honestly, pretty great match for the material, given Elvis's whole thing. Elvis is Baz Luhrmann's sixth movie, and his first in 9 years since The Great Gatsby in 2013. Before that, he also made Romeo plus Juliet and Moulin Rouge, which was his most acclaimed movie, but arguably now Elvis might be. Speaking of which, how has it been received? Pretty well by both critics and audiences. It made about $150 million domestic and $287 million worldwide, which for a non-franchise movie is pretty substantial. It got an A- cinema score and a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a warm, if not tempered, reception. Its warmest reception is arguably by the Academy and awards bodies. It's nominated for 8 Oscars, which is the 4th most of the year. And I hear that the Academy screenings are very well attended and very well received. So apparently Academy members, particularly the older members, are eating this up. Who would like this? I would say Elvis fans, but I'm kind of just assuming there. I don't have much of a relationship to Elvis's music personally, so I can't speak for Elvis fans, but this is also the only theatrically released Elvis biopic to exist, so I would assume they're on board. Baz Luhrmann fans. He's a bit much for me personally, but, you know, a genuine compliment I can give him is he's his own thing, and his movies are his movies. And this is a Baz Luhrmann movie. Fans of montages. This movie is 159 minutes long, and I'm only exaggerating a little bit when I say it feels like 100 of those minutes are montage. More in part 2. So you know the Best Picture nominees, so let's talk about Elvis. I don't like this very much. I think there's stuff to recommend, but overall it's a miss for me. The things I like. I think Austin Butler is excellent. Playing Elvis is actually a pretty tall order. Setting aside the fact that he has to play him from ages like 19 to 42, the real kicker is that this is perhaps the most impersonated and caricatured figure in American pop cultural history. Everyone has an Elvis impression. And I think this performance doesn't really feel like an impression or an impersonation, and certainly not a caricature. It feels like he's inhabiting a character, which is no small feat. The other thing I like is the opening, 20 minutes or so. The first 20 minutes are legitimately very good, and I think the ending is pretty good too, but the ending is also leaning heavily on archival footage. So I think the fact that I like the ending might actually just be, hey, that Elvis guy can really sing. Beyond the opening, it's kind of dull and aimless for the next 2 hours, and dramatically inert. I mentioned this in the first TikTok, but there's so much montage. There are scenes, but barely. There are barely scenes. And the movie suffers for it. There's an attempt at some dramatic moments. There's a late scene where Priscilla leaves Elvis because of his drug use, and Austin Butler and Olivia DeLong are acting their pants off trying to sell it, but I'm pretty sure this is literally the third scene Elvis and Priscilla share together, so there's not really any kind of history or investment for the audience, and it just kind of rings hollow and plays like a standard boilerplate music biopic scene that we've seen 100 times. Again, I mentioned this in the first TikTok, but for the most part, with little exception, the movie is really not interested in Elvis as a man or what makes him tick. It's more interested in his relationship with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and how the Colonel was able to pull the strings and keep Elvis under his thumb for his whole career. And, that's fine. Movies are about relationships, so most movies need a central relationship to be the spine. But this central relationship isn't that interesting to me. And it gets dull quickly. It kind of goes in circles. And maybe that's the point, but I don't know. It didn't work for me. The second time I watched it, I was thinking, this isn't as bad as I remember. Maybe this is better than I remember. And then I realized I still had an hour and a half left. Not good. Seen all the Best Picture nominees, so let's talk about Elvis. I did say I thought the first 20 minutes were legitimately very good, and part of that is because that's when the movie really contextualizes what made Elvis popular. Elvis came up in the early 50s in the Deep South, and it's well understood that the not-so-secret secret to his success is that he was a palatable white vessel delivering black music to white audiences. Yes, I get that the whole "he's white" scene has kind of become like a meme and a big joke.
That's the thing. He's white.
He's white?
But it's also very true and illuminating. The music was very popular, it was easy to mistake for a black singer, and the fact that Elvis was white and that popular and that adept at mimicking black music, it made people see dollar signs.
He's white.
As over-the-top and over-edited as that scene may be, it's Baz Luhrmann after all, I think it's a great scene. The movie shows how Elvis grew up and shows him going to black churches and hearing black music and learning movements from black people that he would eventually replicate on stage to the horror and pearl clutching of many. And that's the other thing. The two things I knew about Elvis before this movie is that he largely borrowed the stylings of black musicians and that his hip-wiggling movements on stage were considered extremely scandalous and, I guess, overtly sexual at the time. What I didn't know was how connected those two things were. It wasn't just that his hip wiggling was seen as sexual, it was seen as black. There's a headline shown in the movie, "White Boy, Black Hips." Apparently that was a real headline in the New York Times. Elvis was going on stage and dancing like a black man, and white girls in the audience were losing their goddamn minds. And that's the part that was unacceptable and immoral and scary to a lot of white people at the time, and that's why he was arrested and censored. I find that fascinating, and I give the movie credit for not only not sanitizing that aspect, but like fully leaning into it.